Hello, new and faithful listeners, and welcome to Remainders, the podcast dedicated to exploring the wonder and joy that is the movies. The old, the new, the remembered, and the forgotten. As we record this episode, it is March 15th, 2024, and I'm feeling lucky because today our love of film transports us back in time to arguably the most artistic and exciting decade in New York's history. This is Basquiat. My name is Darren Varell, and joining me is my co-host Patrick McIntyre, a man who loves reading books almost as much as he loves Kurt Russell movies. Great to be back with you, Pat. How are you on this St. Patrick's Day Eve?
Always such an elegant intro for myself from your point of view, and it's always pretty accurate. So I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really good.
It's great to see you in your Basquiat background, as always.
I had to bring out the art for it. That's for sure. You know, this is obviously right up my alley. And I'm glad you wanted to watch this one. It's a movie I've seen many times.
Okay. So yeah, this is I've never seen this. This movie was barely on my radar. I'm definitely familiar with Basquiat and his work. But this is not a movie that I had ever seen or really knew much about, which is why I was so blown away by the cast, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, really cool, because I knew you'd love the cast. Let's get into it. I'm going to give a little synopsis here for our listeners. If it's your first time listening, welcome. We have our podcast on everywhere that you can find podcasts, like, Apple and Spotify, but you can also watch us in real time. So Pat's talking about the art behind me on our YouTube channel, which is everything can be found at www.remainderspod.com. But without further ado, let's get into it. So no one wants to be part of a generation that ignores another Van Gogh. Basquiat from 1996 is an American biographical drama written and directed by Julian Schnabel, heralded as the first film about an artist by an artist. It stars a young Jeffrey Wright as Jean-Michel Basquiat, the neo-expressionist artist, street artist, and musician who became part of the 27 Club when he died tragically of a heroin overdose in 1988. This film takes us into the life and times of Jean-Michel Basquiat, a gifted artist who made his way to the top of the list of notable and important artists of the 20th century. Working furiously in his short life, he grew from sleeping on park benches to collaborating with Andy Warhol and on to millionaire status in just a few short years. Unlike most important artists, it's fair to say Basquiat was recognized in his time for what he was: a smart, original, and complicated artist. Like most creative minds, Basquiat had trouble fitting in with everyday common life and the norms within it. We see him challenging society and its rules through his work. This film showcases many troubled relationships in Basquiat's life, from his friends to girlfriends to professional connections that all seem to want something from him to exploit. All except for Gina, played by Claire Forlani, who meets Basquiat in a coffee shop early on and only looks to love him for who he is. This realization is even more tragic later on as we witness how lonely and isolated Basquiat has become due to his extremely fast rise to fame and influence. So watch out, all you TikTok stars. It can be lonely at the top. Since starring in this film, Jeffrey Wright has forged a very impressive body of work, including his Oscar-nominated performance this year in American Fiction. It's worth noting that this cast is truly stacked, as Patrick mentioned. Gary Oldman, Parker Posey, Benicio del Toro, Dennis Hopper, Claire Forlani, Christopher Walken, Courtney Love, Willem Dafoe, Tatum O'Neal, and David freaking Bowie as Andy Warhol. I mean, holy shit. How has Basquiat changed art as we know it? And will there ever be another like him? Was this film any good? We'll look to discuss that and more on episode 56 of our podcast today, Basquiat. So Patrick, I just heard this was your first time seeing this film. What were your first thoughts?
Yep, watched half of it last night and the other half this morning. So we're getting fresh takes on it. I am again blown away that this was under the radar for me, basically because of the cast, as we mentioned. love Jeffrey Wright. This movie definitely that was my favorite part of this movie is Jeffrey Wright's performance. He's so great as Basquiat. And I'm excited to talk more about Schnabel, the director, because he's made a couple of the movies that I absolutely love. And this one, I guess I definitely had a great time watching it. It does kind of bounce between an art film and a generic biopic, which I usually tend to be hesitant of a lot of generic biopics just in general because of the paint by numbers for a lot of biopics. And this one doesn't quite get there, but it kind of almost treads on that line, especially for such an interesting artistic world and set of characters for everything here, that it just felt a little generic at times, but that was only fleeting. Everything else I thought was absolutely fantastic, especially Jeffrey Wright's performance. What is it that has drawn you to this film? Was it the subject matter or just the film itself in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the subject matter, we've talked on this podcast before about, that time period from the late 1970s through the 80s is just such a explosive creative time for so many artists that we know, of our generation. Music wise, there was CBGBs and the Ramones, and then you had Andy Warhol during that time, kind of having a resurgence really through befriending people like Basquiat, which this film explores pretty well, I think. He was obviously huge, but he wasn't necessarily as notable as he was in those early 80s or later 70s. But all of these artists kind of supported each other and worked off of each other. It's almost like one of those really good collaborative, things that make you want to be better, so like even Keith Haring's part of this, and not part of the people you
surround yourself by influence you. There's 100%. No doubt. That's in every aspect of life, business, especially art. If you're around artistic people, you're going to be way more successful artistically in general.
Yeah, I think I saw something that Tarantino said, getting together with a bunch of people that are better than you. Yeah. You might not be at the top of that list, but it's still going to make you better. I think that he was saying that it was like a race, it's like if you race with the best, you might not beat the best, but at the same time, you're going to run faster than all the rest. Right, and I always love that analogy because it's true, surround yourself with people that are going to challenge you. And so I guess what I was trying to say earlier is there's like a sort of a competition, but a friendly one, because you're always trying to kind of one up the next person or do better or be more prolific in certain ways. And this is like a frenzy in the 80s in New York City with all of these artists and musicians. I bet,
from what I took from the movie, the competition felt like it wasn't always clear whether or not it was monetary or fame or which aspect was more respectable in terms of who was being more successful. I feel like there was always obviously everybody kind of had their own take on it, but Basquiat was economically very successful financially, but then he was feeling challenged, I guess, by Warhol, or not feeling like they were on the same level. I don't know. I really like that, how it was unclear of what quote unquote success meant to everybody.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good way into it, because what I was saying earlier about isolation, and I feel like that's sort of kind of the sellout of it all, right? When we meet Basquiat in this film, he is with his mother. Obviously, tabula rasa, is clean slate, and he's looking into all of these artists. He's a little child, and he gets to see art on the walls, which is a Picasso painting that he sees in the beginning. And there's that really cool scene where they show the crown, that he was so known for in his time using that crown, and they have that kind of glowing crown on him, you're going to be this great artist. And so it's a nice way to intro into the film of what's going to happen to this character. And we get to see him kind of struggling, sleeping on park benches. Our first introduction to him as a man is in coming out of a cardboard box, as his friend is reading that great quote about Van Gogh, no one wants to miss the next Van Gogh. And he's this person, basically a pauper on the street. And it's really quickly how we get into him being that's what I mean. You don't really see too many artists being successful in their times. And I guess what we can discuss is like, that must have contributed. And I think that this film shows that into his untimely death. How do you manage the quick fame that you weren't really prepared for? I don't think there's any question that Basquiat was gifted inherently. He was a gifted artist, but as all of these other things come into play, money, fortune, status, I think he started to, at least this film is showing you that he started to feel like a sellout, and that isolated him more and more, as we were talking about earlier, which affected all of his relationships. So I do agree with you that sometimes it can be a little boilerplate, like, these biographical films and stuff, but there's substance here to pull that stuff out. You know what I mean? I mean, this is a quick life that ended at 27. I don't even remember being 27, so I can't imagine like doing as much as he did in that much time. It's pretty cool.
I mean, we're not talking too much about biopics, but just in general, that was just I mean, it depends on how you define biopic, but like something like Walk Hard with John C. Reilly is an important film because it exposes cliches in movies, and I feel like we got a lot less of those cliches after Walk Hard in biopics and stuff like that. So
interesting. So that movie, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, influenced. I have never seen it, so I don't know exactly what
it came out like after Walk the Line, and Ray, so those got like the brunt of it. But like it's all about the cliches of a biopic, and so and
the tragic life that
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, you would love it because of like how much it gets into the Walk the Line aspect, but. I think it's just important because just generally it was so well done that people are like, we got to do what we can to stay away from these cliches. I mean, they still happen, just not nearly as much. So that's an important movie. But like I said, this one doesn't really get into that. And also, like I said, it largely defines on like how you define a biopic, because like whether or not you know anything about the character beforehand plays into it. Like something like Goodfellas is technically a biopic, but like you don't really know much about Hill's life before seeing Goodfellas. So it's different from like watching the life of a famous person that you've already been familiar with. So, and Basquiat is kind of like, people definitely know him and his art, but I certainly didn't know anything about his personal life or anything. So it doesn't really fall into those pitfalls or anything. Like I said, Jeffrey Wright, fantastic in this. The cast is really astounding. I do want to point out Michael Wincott as somebody else. He plays the writer. His friend who was supporting him kind of pulled him in early. Great actor. He's shown up in recently in Nope, Jordan Peele's Nope. He was in Alien Resurrection, the original Crow. He's always just been a great actor who has all these great supporting
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves too. He has that great line. I'm gonna cut your heart out with a spoon. Amazing.
I haven't seen that in probably 20 years.
Oh, so fucking good. Listen, I gotta tell you, that movie, I watched it all the time on VHS when I was a kid. I love it. It's terrible for like Costner's like accent and all the things. But dude, it's got that awesome, everything I do it for you. It's got that great cheesy fucking Bryan Adams song. I mean, I love it. Fucking Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Slater, right? Christian Slater.
Wait, what?
Christian Slater, isn't he in it?
Oh, he's fucking Christian Slater's in it, and Morgan Freeman.
It's just like I said, it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I do remember aspects of it. I totally forgot Wincott was in that, so I probably should rewatch it.
I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, great. He is great. He's a very good character actor that I don't think gets a lot of love. So thanks for bringing it up.
I did rewatch a few scenes from Robin Hood Men in Tights because of Richard Lewis passing recently, who's one of my all-time favorites. Yeah. And Richard Lewis I saw Robin Hood Men in Tights as a kid. Mel Brooks was like, at the time, when I was 8 or 9, if you asked me who was the greatest person in the world, it was Mel Brooks. Like, I was. And
a young Dave Chappelle in that.
Yes, Dave Chappelle's it. But I was obsessed with Mel Brooks. I remember seeing Men in Tights in the theaters, and that was how I discovered Richard Lewis. And I was like, this has got to be one of the funniest men alive. And all of his scenes in those movies are still absolutely hilarious. So rest in peace to a legend there for sure. But yeah, like I said, Michael Wincott's great in this. It really does get held together by Wright, who is somebody who I really love. I have not seen American Fiction yet. He was nominated.
Neither have I, and I feel like it's a tragedy. Thank God I got out to the theaters to see Poor Things before, and we'll talk about this later.
Yeah,
before the Oscars because I loved it. But yeah, anyway. That's one of the films that I hadn't seen, and I love Jeffrey Wright as well. He's for me, like, I love him in that Lady in the Water. You know, he's so fucking good in it, and I love like him in a M. Night Shyamalan film. But although so many good performances, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember first noticing him in Broken Flowers. Jim
Jarmusch.
The Jim Jarmusch Bill Murray movie in 2005, because he was like his best friend in that movie. He had a pretty major role. I remember that being like the first time I noticed him, and then he popped up in Casino Royale right after that. So, and yeah, I mean, he's fantastic. I actually really loved him in The French Dispatch, which I think was I didn't fully get on board with what's Anderson's last movie that didn't get nominated, Asteroid City, but The French Dispatch I absolutely loved, and his role in that is fantastic. So
yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Asteroid City as far. I mean, still great, of course.
I mean, it has
Wes Anderson,
people who love it. Like it has its defenders. So I'm sure, like in 10 years, if I watch it again, I'm sure I'll probably pick something more up on it. But on the first viewing, it didn't do anything. It's kind of
like French Dispatch as well, though. Like there's a lot going on in his later films here that it's really hard to follow. So right, like maybe it's one of those things where I need to watch a few times and really sink it in, because it's not like Wes Anderson makes something that's not stylistically kick-ass. It's not like the film is boring. It's like
no.
It's very interesting always, but it's like kind of like when you pit it against his other films, it wasn't my favorite of his filmography.
But French Dispatch, right, as playing Roebuck, I mean, it instantly was one of my favorites. So, but yeah, like I said, like I did not even realize that Jeffrey Wright was portraying Basquiat before you recommended watching this, and it was just such a pleasant surprise because he's obviously been a talent for a long time. Just didn't really notice it in the 90s at least. So.
Yeah, totally. And again, let's talk about the cast. You see Willem Dafoe in this, and obviously another buzzworthy person for his role in Poor Things. It sounds like every single year we have something that Willem Dafoe has been in that is going to be Oscar nominated. I mean, I don't know if he could do any wrong in my book. He's great. He shows up in so much. He works hard, and that's why he's always there every year being nominated. But yeah. We got David Bowie, which is it's
about like perfect casting. I mean, if he's going to play anybody, Andy Warhol is the person that plays Warhol.
And I heard that actually the wig and stuff was really Warhol's wig and all that. And then Bowie being part of that scene back in the day, like in the New York scene, he would have known Warhol. And so he probably would have been the best person to portray him since he actually knew him personally, and also an eclectic artist himself. Now, I'm going to piss a lot of people off and tell you that I'm not like the biggest David Bowie fan of his music. I've never really connected to it. However,
I remember you saying this at least 15 years ago when we were drinking at a bar one day, and I was just like, it never left me. I was like, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. I always remembered it. I've never busted your balls for it, but I'm like, I mean,
what's your feeling? You like Bowie?
I love Bowie. Bowie is an absolute fucking master. And I mean, it's all obviously opinion, but like what you can't deny is his influence on punk music.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I definitely respect the man. It's not like, but it's kind of like the Clash too. It's like I choose the Ramones over the Clash, and it's not like apples and oranges. They're different bands, but at the same time, they're kind of lumped into the same punk genre. And if I was to pick one, it's going to be like the easier, straightforward, quick Ramones instead of the sort of complicated and very like musically gifted Clash.
Yeah,
David Bowie. There's definitely certain songs that I love of his, and he's like, no doubt influenced so many artists, just like Jean-Michel Basquiat. I mean, half the people that I see on the walls out here in LA, that when I do put stuff into galleries, or I have, there's at least one artist that is doing the Jean-Michel Basquiat. There's no doubt that these artists influence is vast. And that's how you know they were a truly great artist, because they were originals that sparked everybody to copy it.
Yeah. No, I mean, sticking with Bowie for a second, I've always loved him. Moody Daydream. I mean, he's such a great artist. He's such a magnificent, like, overseer of like art in general. I mean, let's think his influence also like on other musicians, producing Lou Reed's Transformer was one of my favorite albums of all time. I mean, his print is all over that album. His roles in movies, Labyrinth. I mean, he was a god. So there's that's definitely my stance on him. So
Labyrinth, starring David Bowie and his package.
One and the same for sure. So.
Yeah. Okay. So getting back to his role in this film, I mean, exceptional as Andy Warhol. And it's so cool because, you're going into a movie about artists, right? And about a time in history that is like fully immersed in creative. And these actors are really playing the role well, but not making it comical. Anybody else could have played the role of Jean-Michel Basquiat and made it a little funny, but like the way that Jeffrey Wright does it with his like seriousness, but also like sort of the way he hits his beats and stuff like that is like, I think there was a Roger Ebert quote about how he said he's thinking, but he's not saying it out loud. And so, that's sort of like a great thing when you watch films. It's just like, you can kind of see what's going on in the person's mind just by their expressions and not what they're saying. I feel you get that a lot from Jeffrey Wright in this. But then also, on the other hand, with David Bowie, you just see like the eccentricness of this larger than life figure that nobody could really figure out in life. So many movies have, displayed Andy Warhol. Recently, there was a film on Netflix called The Andy Warhol Diaries, which I actually found entertaining and interesting because it was reading, and reenactments of him and what he felt about, the AIDS epidemic in New York. And, that's all part of this. These things are happening congruently. They don't talk about it much in the film, but lately a lot of films have been talking about like what was happening and what was, also kind of the genesis of a lot of the creativity that was happening. I mean, so many folks that we're talking about that exist in that time had died of AIDS themselves, like Keith Haring and others.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded time for sure, and I think it does a pretty good job of exploring that world. Like I said, just it was not. I don't know. I guess the direction was just a little bit more straightforward than I was anticipating. But I mean, this was Schnabel's first movie. So one movie that I want to focus on, just note that he went on to direct, is The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Are you familiar with that? The 2007 picture?
Mm-mm.
Awesome fucking movie. So it's based on a true story. It's based on the book about a French photographer who basically had like an aneurysm, and he became paralyzed just out of nowhere, like in his early 40s. He became paralyzed, and all he could do was move his eye, his right eye. And so he ended up going on to transcribe his entire experience by blinking and transcribing, and he ended up writing a whole memoir by
sort of like Morse code,
like A, B, C, D, by how many times he would blink.
Wow.
And he ends up transcribing this entire experience, writes this memoir, and then that's what his movie, Schnabel's movie, is based on, that memoir. Fantastic book. Easy. I mean, it's a short book. I would definitely recommend reading it, and I love the movie. So, like, he's obviously a hugely talented director. For him to go on to these other ones that are just so successful, but that would be highly one I would recommend for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, I actually have not seen many of his works. Is there any other films that you had seen that you liked of his?
So, he did Lou Reed's Berlin, the concert film, which is fantastic. Same year, actually. Berlin was an amazing early album that wasn't initially well received when it came out, which is kind of the case for a lot of Lou Reed albums, that they don't always get the best reviews, but then people eventually realize like how many masterpieces he made. So his concert film Berlin came out in 2007, and that one's great. I have not seen I had plans and I just didn't make it. I remember when it was in theaters just a couple of years ago, the Van Gogh movie with Willem Dafoe at Eternity's Gate.
Yeah, I had not seen it either. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I definitely need to see, but that's about it. I mean, he's got a pretty short biography. And then Before Night Falls, I remember seeing, when it first came out in 2000, and I don't remember too much about it, to be honest. Javier Bardem and Johnny Depp. I must have maybe, I don't know, been watching it while doing something else because I definitely remember seeing it, but watching the scenes, I don't remember too much about it.
Come on.
But I know a lot of people like that one a lot. So
practice what you preach. Put your phone away when you're watching films. Come on, man. I know you're on there all day on Instagram while you're watching your films.
I was definitely not on Instagram in 2000 when I saw this movie when it first came out. So I can guarantee you that.
Oh boy.
I could have been distracted by
MySpace,
a Mystery Science Theater episode or something at the time, but probably not my Instagram. So
yeah, you've never been a big social media guy, so I can't fault you for that. But yeah, I haven't seen that film either. And obviously, as I'm talking about Basquiat and how much I've loved it and how much I've watched it, you asked earlier, like why, and I do think just because I'm such a big fan of that time period and I'm such a big fan of Basquiat's work as an artist, so that has a big part of it. But it's also a great film. I mean, talking about it today with you is interesting because you had never seen it, and I don't think I could talk to a lot of different people. I watched this film a couple of weeks ago, and then obviously last night before our conversation today. But when I watched it a couple of weeks ago, it had been a couple of years since I had seen it. And for all of you out there listening, it is on Criterion right now if you want to watch the film. And yeah, it's one of those things where when I bring it up to people that I know, everybody's like, I love that film. It doesn't seem to be, at least the way it's aged, it doesn't seem to be a film that has not been well accepted. And obviously it's on Criterion, so they think it's important enough for you to be able to, view this film. So it sounds like it's had a good life. And I'm thinking about the time period when it was made, which is, let's see, 1996. Yeah. So that's not that long after Basquiat died, which was in 1988. Sometimes it's kind of crazy for me to think about the way he was perceived even then, not that long after he died. And I mentioned he was famous during his time here on Earth. Everyone was looking for like that next Warhol, it sounds like, in that time period. And he had so much success and so much fame that other artists never get until they die. And now with Basquiat, it's just grown. And here we are in 2024, and I think he's still one of the artists. Like if you have a Basquiat, you're set for life, and your kids are set for life, and their grandkids are set for life if they sell it. It's like, really, really.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like he had a couple paintings on the list of like the most expensive paintings ever sold, which I actually would not have got. I guess I didn't realize the financial demand for his paintings were that high. Because I mean, he's up there with like Van Gogh and like some of the most famous artists of all time in terms of just the amount of money that has been spent on his painting.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, like we're not that far removed from when he passed away, and it's interesting because that's pretty rare. Van Gogh died, I believe, when he was around 37. And I saw an exhibit in Chicago in 2015 that was fantastic. It was just like a full on, they were quoting it as like his 3 bedrooms that he had painted, and like sort of like how those came to be and why he painted them. And, they're the same portrait, but just in 3 different ways. And it was the first time they had ever been in the same room together ever. It was really cool. But they had a timeline of his life. And like, of course, there's a lot of tragedy in his life and complications. But he lived to 37. That's 10 years, a good 10 years after Jean-Michel Basquiat. I mean, dying at 27 is crazy. We look at like the 27 Club I mentioned earlier. You got Kurt Cobain in there, I believe Janis Joplin, and then Jimi Hendrix, and all of these great musicians and stuff. But yeah, that seems to be a weird age that a lot of really talented people die at.
Was Belushi 27?
I don't know, but possibly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprised.
It's the unusual age. I saw Debbie Harry was one of the first purchasers of his first painting for $200 in the early 80s.
I mean, how much
Yeah.
that and that's of course now that's known as the first painting that was ever sold. Not that she needed help monetarily, but I imagine that if she still has that painting, that's got to be one of the most expensive Basquiat's. And then of course, and I've also got to see a lot of these in person at the Art Institute in Chicago for that Warhol museum or the Warhol exhibit that I saw. What was that, pretty shortly before I left the city, maybe 2019, 2018. But they had a lot of their collaborative work up there, and it was really awesome to see that in person. And they explored that in this film, the relationship, and in a greater extent of, again, the biographical things that they do, the way that Warhol's death affected Basquiat seemed to be the final straw into his drug addiction and his spiral towards his own death, is that he couldn't kind of comprehend how his good friend at that point and a collaborative, contemporary was just gone from the earth.
Yeah. Yeah. That scene near the end, he's in the bathroom. He's he's kind of like picking at his face because it's kind of deteriorating from the drugs. Tom Waits is playing on the soundtrack. It's just a pretty sincere and kind of tragic scene. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, at this point in the film, we're witnessing a pretty quick rise. And, what did you think of the, when I mentioned earlier that it seemed to be like he was getting paranoid and he was getting sort of isolated and was kind of moving in away from this world of art where everybody was like, you're the next big thing. We need to have it. But there was, the breakup then kind of his relationship. And I felt like that wasn't necessarily highlighted as one of the cooler parts of this film for some people. But to me, I kind of liked that there was one thread of a person who actually cared about you for who you are. But of course, you don't realize that until it's kind of too late, because it feels like the Claire Forlani character, she's the one who finds him almost overdosed at some point, and gets some help, and eventually it's too much for her, and she has to go away. But towards the end of the film, he realizes, whoa, somebody actually cared about me outside of this bullshit,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of read that as his own paranoia. I mean, I certainly believe, and you can see it in the movie, that there are people who genuinely cared about him, but he just didn't view it that way.
Yeah, it seems like he always had people in his life that could have cared about him. But yeah, it was more about all right, what are they trying to take from me? Because I've got this wealth and fame. And then even the inner issues as an artist is how can I even be any good? All they want is just whatever I slap onto the page. It's almost like at that point, you could do whatever on the painting and people will be like, holy shit, it's the next Basquiat. But that's not without exploring some of the ridicule that he got in this film, which is also a big part of the film, and people picking it apart when he's kind of not used to that. He's used to spray painting on the side of buildings and then getting written about as who's this new graffiti artist? And then all of a sudden he's huge. And then, notable magazines and reporters and art critics are saying, this guy's a flash in the pan. Who is this? And then he has to deal with that part of it,
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that's always the fun part about it. And then they don't go too much into it, but the race component of him being a Black person in a predominantly white, affluent world, the art world. So it's and like I said, they only kind of touch on that and a little bit of his paranoia with that, but that's I'm sure is something that he struggled with externally and internally at the time. So.
Well, I'm glad they did put that in there because, and I'm glad they didn't, I guess, nothing seems to be they focused on for too long. It's kind of there's these moments that make this character and so they're important. But that's a part of his work is the race thing. Yeah. And they show that through that conversation with that critic who's sitting down writing the article about him. And they're asking him about and he says something about the ape. Remember, he's like, oh, what, an ape? And that's one moment where you realize he's kind of challenging the critic. Are you saying this just because I'm Black?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that scene.
Was that the Walken interview?
Yes,
Okay,
Christopher Walken, who's
'Cause
always so good.
I wasn't. That's the thing. There's like so many fucking amazing, talented actors just come in for like 1 or 2 scenes, and just like they're like, all right, I'm out for the rest of the movie. That was really good because there was clear antagonism from Walken, but again, like not in a overt way. Like he was clearly kind of trying to capture a certain trying to pigeonhole Basquiat, but like in a passive,
or trying to think he's not smart, that he's not going to know what he's trying to
certainly
get.
Talking down to him, expecting him like, and just bringing up like huge complex questions, but then expecting like a single word answer on them. But yeah, it was just a very subtly really well done scene of him just being like, all right, these are the people I have to like deal with now because of my fame. So, and which
100%. Yeah, I like the way we just,
which I guess is part of the job, but again, that's not a job that not part of a job that I don't think anybody wants, is to be that scrutinized under those lights. Yeah,
totally. I mean, everybody always wants the fame and fortune, but then when you get it, what do you do with it? Like that's why I mentioned at the beginning with the TikTok thing. I was just thinking, I wrote out that intro last night and this morning because I just wanted to be able to have like a concise, focused thought about what the film was about for people that are listening. But I threw in that TikTok thing because as I was reading it, I was realizing like that's what's happening in the world right now, social media and different things. All of a sudden people are like, they're successful like that, from some crazy thing that they've done. I don't know what these like little thumbs up things are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean that's telling the audience to like the video and subscribe.
There you go. Yeah, I never seen that on my Zoom before, but anyway,
it's your Zoom is reading your mind. It's like, I want everybody to like me, so totally. Let's give me a thumbs
as
up.
I'm talking about social media. How crazy. But anyway, long story short, like the quick rise of fame like that without like, I mean, a lot of people are really young who have that, and this is like the other thing is Basquiat was really young when this happened, and what do you do with that?
Like, and then I mean, we always evolve into a conversation with social media. If somebody gets super famous now, it's still niche. It's not like people are becoming super famous. Like, there are multiple times when I discover somebody's name and apparently they're super famous, and I've never heard of them once in my life. So,
well, sure. I'm not going to say who this was, but I was talking to somebody in Malibu one time who was very well known in music and very well known in the movie industry, and had retired. Is done with his career, and we were talking with him. Yeah, I wish. Oh man, Eagle Power, that'd be amazing. But when I was speaking with him, it was like just cool to kind of like riff on like what's going on in the world today. And he had mentioned, he's like, yeah, all of the coastline stuff here in Malibu, those are all properties that keep on turning. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, because people get really, really famous really, really quick, and they have a lot of money. And then they invest it in these amazing properties, but like by the next year, they're not famous anymore and they have to sell them. And I was like, wow, to hear that being like, that's kind of the world. Like when you're young and you've got a lot of money and you've got power, like how do you sustain it? As you get older, I think you think a little bit more about, if you're an artist and that's who you are, I think you think a little bit more about like what you leave behind. I'm not speaking generally here, but I mean, when it happens really quickly out of the blue, how do you sustain that? The world of social media, I think people are still trying to figure it out.
So if they ban TikTok, are you going to freak out? Because I know that's your gravy train and you're on there all the time. So
not TikTok so much, but Instagram I'm on. And it's an interesting question because I've been working really hard for the last 2 years to not be online as much. As I started out, it was a great tool for me to be able to let people know what I do. And I still feel like it is, I just finished the Plain White T's record and I got it in my hands. So yesterday I made a reel to show people what it's like for an artist to hold something physically after all of the time that you spent. Of course, I put that into a 30-second clip, it was months and months of going to the studio and talking with the band, all of their management and people who, I want to put together this package for all the work that they did. I mean, it's so complicated, but everybody got, put it together in 30 seconds, which is fine. That's cool. It's like still nice for me to be able to tell people that's what I do, because maybe that'll lead to more work. And that's kind of how I view what I do. I'd like people to know about it, and I don't have anybody writing about me just yet. So, I have to kind of do it myself. And I imagine a lot of other people feel the same way. Now, that's not the whole piece of the pie. That's like 10% of it. I'm actually behind the scenes. There's a lot of work I'm creating that nobody's seen. That's just for me, or it's possibly for a gallery one day that might want to do a full, show, which is my goal. I want to get on and do things outside and talk with people. I had a show at the Colony Theater here, a group show, the other day, and I got to do the mixer where you go and you talk to the other artists, and it was awesome. Everybody is like explaining the process that they went in to do their art. Everybody was talking about what it's like to be an artist here in Los Angeles, and wow, you don't get that in social media. Now, this was an artist only event, but people get to go to the Colony Theater to see their they're putting on Footloose right now, and people get to walk through and see the art before they go in. And that's like the best exposure for me, is because you get to see it physically. It's a different experience. This is a long way around what you said about TikTok. So TikTok, I feel like, is a little different as far as the way that you showcase things. It's a little bit, I think it's like quicker as far as like what you want people to see, and not more about the long term. I feel like Instagram just kind of lives there in case people are like, who the hell is Darren Varel? And then they look and they see the work that I've done. And so if Instagram goes away, I might be a little like sad about it, but I understand that it is right now voted on to, at least by the House of Representatives, right? That they might ban
TikTok, not Instagram.
Right, TikTok. Yeah, and obviously, probably for political reasons. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, if that goes away, I won't be so upset, because I feel like I've worked to get outside as an artist, and I'm working on things that nobody sees anyway. It's not like I finished something. Maybe in the early days, I finished something. I was like, I gotta let everybody see what it looks like right away. Now it's more like I'm thinking more about, who is Darren Varel? Who is, what do I want to say? What do I want to leave behind? I'm always thinking maybe more 10 years of who Darren Varel is when I'm working, as opposed to who Darren Varel is immediately on TikTok. So, 10 people can like the post.
Well, let me tell you, buddy, I think on a regular basis, who is Darren Varel? It's a very meaningful thing for me. So it's just, and I always get to enjoy discovering more of it. So,
well, what's cool about doing a podcast is like, you ask me questions like that I don't get to answer all the time. Which is also, this is part of my, as you would say, artist legacy, because I get to, here's a journal. Every 2 weeks, you and I do a journal of what we're watching and consuming and what's inspiring us, because we love film so much, just like everybody else out there. And it's cool, because here's a movie that we're watching about an artist, and as artists ourselves, we get to go and like talk about it. And that's what makes the world go around in creativity, right?
Definitely a major part about it. Yeah. The ultimate playlist, the ultimate watch list. That's definitely what I love the most about it. So for sure.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we can wrap up our conversation on this and get into a little bit of current events and what we're doing and what we're watching. Like I mentioned, the Oscars just happened, but is there anything else you want to say about this film? In summation, for me, I just want to say, if you're out there thinking about watching this film, definitely go see it. Whether you know who Basquiat is or not, like we just mentioned a lot, the cast is stacked with young talent who have thrived in their careers. And it is a really good film about a period in time that you should know about.
Fantastic. A couple things of note, and then we can wrap up that we didn't get to. Sam Rockwell also shows up in here as Thug number 1, just in a super short scene. So certainly before he got big, he even made it into the stacked cast. John Cale from the Velvet Underground does the score. We didn't mention that. So obviously Schnabel has huge ties to Lou Reed, John Cale, the Velvet Underground, everybody in it. So I love John Cale. And one last one. This one's more just certainly more obscure. Is Vincent Gallo pops up in the dinner scene. No words, no lines or anything. And it turns out Gallo was in a band with Basquiat.
Yeah.
You saw that? Yeah. I mean, it was on the Wikipedia page, so it's obviously well known enough. But like Vincent Gallo, we've mentioned a couple of times being, one of Roger Ebert's favorite directors.
Oh man!
And so I actually just read the part. Like I didn't read this part. Ebert, I saw that he eventually saw the director's cut of Brown Bunny and gave that a positive review, which I didn't realize. So
that was part of it. But that was part of Ebert's Twitter period. Okay. Which I just finished Opposable Thumbs, which I mentioned last week as we were talking, or 2 weeks ago when we talked about that book that you had gifted me about Siskel and Ebert. Fucking fantastic. Really loved it. And I loved how Ebert talked about, how to continue film criticism post being on television. And that is definitely one of those interacting in hand-to-hand combat, really, with the director of the Brown Bunny. And if you don't know anything about it, you need to go and seriously look up what was transcribed, because those are some of the best back and forth I've ever heard between a critic and a director.
So seeing Gallo at that table in the movie was great. And then, I'd love to hear Gray is the noise band, as they describe it, as that's the band he had with Basquiat. So,
yeah, they explore that in the film briefly, his stint in music. Also, I want to just say to anybody out there listening, there is a film, an actual biography called Boom for Real about Basquiat. And Pat, you'd love it too. It's about this time period, but it's about Basquiat. So not, a fictionalized version, although this is pretty true. There's some fictionalized stuff.
Seems like semi-fictionalized.
Yeah. In Julian's version that we're talking about today. But Sarah Driver, who is Jim Jarmusch's partner, she hasn't directed very many films, but she directed Boom for Real. And obviously, Jarmusch and her being part of that New York scene, they know it very, very well, and you would love it. It's really good, and it's obviously very true to life. And so I really recommend that. I think Jarmusch at some point, and maybe the Sarah Driver is part of his crew usually, not necessarily as director, but she's on a lot of films that Jarmusch has done in different ways, and they must have some Amazon deal, because I believe I saw that on Amazon. And then I remember watching like Patterson on there for a while, Jim Jarmusch, and even like the Rolling Stones film that he did, Gimme Shelter. Or wait, no, that was Scorsese. Anyway, long story short,
I think he did the Iggy
Pop one. Yeah, that's right. Sorry. So a lot of those were on Amazon for a while, and you might be able to find it there. Called Boom for Real. Yeah,
I'm looking at it. So, but the documentary is based on a previous book, though, that existed. Is that what you're saying, or it was just
maybe I didn't know that, but
okay. Maybe I misheard that. I'm looking at it right now. Yes, the late teenage years, it says. So that would be really interesting. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that were around during that time that still will give you like insight. Like for instance, Debbie Harry's bandmate and one-time partner Chris Stein has released a bunch of books of photography and things like that he's taken over the years. He'll post that stuff on Instagram as well, but the books are really good, and they written about the time and what it was like to live there, and really in-depth photos. And thank God he was there to like document, because it's like New York during that time that you don't get to see ever. You just hear about it.
It's definitely not. It's definitely a scene that is full of stories, to say the least. So I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. So,
yeah. But anyway, so very cool. Thanks for discussing this film with me. Thanks for everybody for listening. And this is the segment of the show where we get into a little bit of what we're doing now in the present moment. And Pat, what's been going on with you over there in Chicago?
What is going on with me in Chicago? Nothing. I did watch the Oscars, which I hate, but I always watch. And this year, not that bad. It was actually pretty entertaining. They they were pretty zippy with it. Didn't have too much bullshit, and they pretty much went straight to the good stuff. There was like it was a little bit more in the vibe of like praising movies, because that's kind of how the Oscars always are. They praise a little bit more celebrity, which is always the annoying part. But they had this format where for the best actor and actress and supporting actor and supporting actress, they would bring out 5 previous winners and then basically just give like a wedding dinner toast to the current nominees. I was like, it's really stupid, but it was also like, I mean, yeah, this is
totally how
if you're going to have like a cheesy way to honor just the medium of movies, that's a decent way to do it. And then,
right. I mean, obviously everyone's patting each other on the back, but that's what you signed up for, you know? Right, so you kind of have to just get on board with it. Yeah.
And the reactions from the current nominees as they're sitting there, just like, thanks, I appreciate that. They're into it, but like it's still like, all right, we're just like watching this person receive a dinner toast.
Well, can we just talk quickly about Nicolas Cage then?
Well, yeah, Cage giving praise to Giamatti. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. But yeah, man, I mean, the second that happened, I'm like, I really need some sort of heist comedic / action film with the two of them, or whatever they want to do together. If there's the two of them co-leading as like a road trip movie, that would be something special. So
100%. Yeah, I'm glad you liked that the same way. It was just a little bit of a weird, like, okay, we're patting each other on the back and like, you know, schmooze fest with each other, but at the same time, like, yeah, but I'm here for that, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, my favorite part of the entire night was the second they announced Arnold Schwarzenegger's name. I was like, all right, I'm on board here. He comes out with Danny DeVito. Great combination right there. And so they start busting Michael Keaton's balls because they were both Batman villains. So they're going back and forth, and Michael Keaton's playing right into it.
Stoic.
Because he is and always will be Batman.
Right.
And then so you have that great interaction, and then they give the Oscar to Godzilla. So that was clearly the best 3-minute stint of the entire night. So.
Oh yeah, I can imagine it was like a jubilee for you over there. You must have been like, with your popcorn, you know.
So like Arnold announced it, he's like Godzilla, and then Danny DeVito's just like yeah, he's like cheering her the whole time, and so like just having them just really celebrate that, and like it was mentioned, the first time any Godzilla movie has ever received an Oscar, and Godzilla -1, definitely one of my favorite movies last year. So. For the entire night, it was worth it for that interaction alone. So,
what'd you think of Al Pacino?
Great. I mean, I love how they just bring out people who are just like, yeah, I guess I'll do it, whatever, and they're just like, oh, that's the best picture, and then they always end up fumbling the
kind of like Warren Beatty with La La Land. Yeah,
so it's like, and my eyes see Oppenheimer, and I'm sure you're excited that Oppenheimer did a clean sweep of a lot of the major ones. So
yeah, that was my favorite film that I saw last year. So
that was up there for number 1 for you. That's awesome.
I mean, I loved it. I just thought it was so well done. But I'm also a very big person about. So obviously, we're talking about a time in history here in this film we talked about today, but that's one of my favorite things is just history and what happened during times. And it was a well-written movie directed by one of the greatest directors of our time with a great cast. And how can you go wrong? Pitting it against Barbie was interesting, right? Because they're just like 2 completely different films. And that was part of the fun.
I mean, that was the best
last year.
I don't know how strategic that was, but like, it was the best marketing.
Okay. So you know what we're talking about right here with that is the same thing that they're talking about in Why Siskel and Ebert were popular. 2 guys that completely disagreed on everything, mostly, and didn't necessarily care for each other when they started out. They had an actual conversation that they disagreed about, and people were there to see that. They didn't want to see 2 people that agreed on everything. That's a great thing about art. Culture, everything. You have an opinion. You don't have to agree with everybody, you know? And that's the thing about Barbie and Oppenheimer. They're 2 completely different movies, and it was fun. It was fun for people to, like, you know, in the age of social media, pit them against each other, because it was like, this doesn't even make sense, and this is why we love it, you know?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, the marketing was so perfect because the perception is that they're pitted against each other, but they're not pitted against each other at all. They're just both a celebration of big budget filmmaking. And so that's why they're like very similar in most ways.
Right. And those marketing campaigns that started with people doing all that stuff anyway were all, of course, like, put into the water stream so that, fed by everybody in the marketing side of both studios so that people would do this. I mean, it's so clear that they're able to look. It's like kind of like everything in life. Like when you see people who are doing things, you can like use it to your advantage. And I feel like social media has become that way. Look no further than the Johnny Depp trial when you heard everybody talk about the way that, actors and actresses are perceived on their social medias, why they get hired, because we know it's going to make money. If you're looked at as a very popular person, we're going to hire you. We want all that audience that you've already built in to come to our film and make it successful.
That and Nepo babies. So,
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, that comes into it too, right? I mean, you got like a lot of people making a lot of cash, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, how about I want to do this too, mom and dad, and then all of a sudden you've got some lucrative. You got a nice cushion to fail at being an artist. Meaning you can be as crazy as you want and you can be as cool and as original as you want, but with like the understanding that you're not going to have to live on the street if it doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure. The movies. So yeah, I'm always down with the Oscars, even though they're usually pretty lame, but yeah, they're definitely better than the last several years. So, what else I got? I'm excited next week. I got the Marconi Fest at the Music Box here in Chicago.
Hell yeah.
This is looking like a stacked lineup. I mean, Friday, there's a 2-day stretch that goes from starts Friday, The Untouchables, Days of Heaven, Once Upon a Time in America, The Thing, and then the Man with No Name trilogy on Saturday. So in praise of Marconi, one of the greatest musicians of all time, especially in film. So they definitely know who to praise and how to praise them at the Music Box. So my hat's off to them as always.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say, as far as the Oscars go on my side, I did see Poor Things in the theater at nice. Universal City Walk. So that's like the Universal theme park. They have a theater in there. And it's the first time I ever went there, which is really cool. And they were playing it for $5. You could see Poor Things. So we saw it the day before the Oscars. And I wanted to just go on record and say that was a better Barbie. And I look at these things, I look at these things like this was very much like a film about women and how men are in their world and how they're treated by men and how, how women kind of get fucked around by men. Okay. Like that's what I think of both of the films when I go into them. I mean, there are a lot more than that, but that's definitely pretty close to the root of it. And Barbie is great for that. In telling a story. And, a lot of times it's like the package that it's put in. Barbie is very shiny, very pop music. And Poor Things is very, indie band. Like if I was going to put it in terms of like music, it's like you got the pop like sensation that's an instant hit that you can't deny. And then you have the package of the indie film where it's like, damn, I'm an artist, and I like what they're saying, but I got to really listen. So if you're looking at Barbie and Poor Things, in my opinion, it's between the pop song and the indie song. And one is very easy kind of to digest, still with a lot of complicated things being talked about. And then there's the indie song that you really got to listen to. And it's smart as fuck. And it took a lot of time and it's very creative. Both films do that. But for my money, I'm less the pop song and more the indie song, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand the discourse on Poor Things. There seems like half the people think it's like a super feminist film. And then the other half thinks it's like a super anti-woman film. This is a misogynist
film. I thought it was super feminist.
I'm not saying one's better than the other, but like I'm surprised at how many people disagree over that movie, just what that movie is about. I think a lot of people are just take offense that you have the plot of a film about a woman with a brain of a baby.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's already flawed because you've got people be like, I don't want to go into, like, it's the same thing with Barbie. Anybody who hated it, it was like a weird kind of discourse because like if you hated it, you must be anti-woman, you know? And it's like, but if you liked it, you must be like crazy because, you know, it was so hard to sift through people's intentions when they view that film or like how they were going to be viewed afterwards on their opinions on it. But Poor Things for me, it was clear.
Just really quick, I want to say like that is a strategy that certain movies have taken though, and so why audiences should be a little hesitant. Something like Madam Web or Miss Marvel, these garbage movies, and then the reaction is like, oh, if you don't like it, it's because you're a misogynist, which is bullshit. It's just like it's a very lame way for a studio to protect itself from making terrible films. So,
and that's what I mean. I think there was like a lot of daring choices and a lot of vulnerability in Poor Things. And then I will say, sorry, this is probably getting a little long, but I just wanted to say with the Oscars, the I'm Just Ken was so better. So much better than it was in the film. Okay, in my opinion, I thought the film, like version of Barbie, like when there was all those Ken singing at the end, it just took me out of it. It's kind of almost walked out of Barbie, to be honest with you. I didn't love the movie, and I loved the version that happened at the Oscars. I was like, this is so great, you know. But why didn't I love it in the film? I don't know. I'm still thinking about all that because. I liked it, you know, aesthetically, it looked great. I love Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which I heard that Greta had wanted it to look like color-wise and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to understand it, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe Barbie will grow as one of the greatest films of all time. And I'm just like, you know, it's got a lot of talk for a reason, and a lot of people are conflicted about it for a reason. But for my money, I'll go see Poor Things over Barbie any day. Not that they're supposed to be pitted up against each other, but I suppose I'm doing that right now.
Yeah, that Emma Stone, she's pretty talented.
She's great. You saw The Curse, of course.
I haven't finished it. Yeah, I've been watching it. And I love somebody pointed out is that Emma Stone winning the Oscar over Lily Gladstone would have been the best finale for the show The Curse that could have possibly happened.
Holy shit, I never even thought of that.
Somebody pointed that out on Twitter. I was
like, man, I got to tell my girlfriend about that. That is so fucking crazy.
I haven't gotten to the end of The Curse, but I definitely can see how that would be an appropriate ending. So.
Oh, man, that's insane. That's going to blow my girlfriend's mind as soon as I tell her that. That's so crazy. Wow. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Oscars. Anything? Oh yeah. Billie Eilish has 2 Oscars and Martin Scorsese has 1. That was, it's just a stat that exists in the world, which is fine. I'm pro Billie Eilish, but, it is true. So.
Wow. What an interesting way to look at it at the Oscars, you know, it's like, well, but then, you know, you go, oh, Annie Hall won the Oscar, and Star Wars didn't win. It's like, I don't know. How do you compare all this shit? You know, even me talking about Barbie and Poor Things, you know,
that's why it's a stupid thing to begin with. That's why they should just focus entirely on just celebrating the medium of film, and the awards doesn't matter at all. But yeah, Killers got nothing. Irishman got nothing. I think it was like over 20 nominations between those 2 films and 0 Oscars for it. So,
well, as we know,
Scorsese's just somebody they like to nominate, but not necessarily give, because both of those movies, especially The Irishman, are going to age extremely well. Like Irishman, I think it will just continue to be in his top 5 of all time. And
especially because they tell us what happens to Jimmy Hoffa in the film.
What do you mean? As opposed to what?
You actually get to see what he thinks has happened to Jimmy Hoffa in the film, as opposed to everybody doesn't know, you know, where's Jimmy Hoffa? Yeah.
I'm going to jail for this, you dumb motherfuckers. I'm going to jail for this.
I'll tell you, like, if you want any other definitive reason why the Oscars shouldn't be like your barometer of good, I'll give you two reasons.
I think everybody deep down actually knows that, but it's still just, you can't avoid just naming something is better than that.
Well, for two reasons here. Hoop Dreams snubbed, and Ebert pissed off about it. Fast forward to Ebert's film, directed by the same director, snubbed at the Oscars for Best Picture, when clearly both of those films were very important and should have been winners that year. And then reading I had to switch over from reading Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I've been enjoying, but then you got me the book on Siskel and Ebert, so I had to switch over to that because I just had to. So there's that fact in the Siskel and Ebert book, and then the fact there's a scene I'm reading right now where they elaborate on Jake Cahill going to a bar with the character that Timothy Olyphant plays in the movie they're making, and they're talking about actors and actresses and people they know, and it's kind of like a little thing, and they bring up and go more into depth about the Great Escape and why Jake Cahill came, as they say, this close to being in it. And, he's like, well, it's kind of like more like this close, but yeah. And then he doesn't want to talk about it, but as they elaborate in it, they talk about the reasons why. He's like, there was 5 people up for it. And here's the reason why all of us I would be the last person picked. And it's so wonderfully written and so smart as far as knowing film. But the last one was like the guy that plays, I forget his name, but in West Side Story, I'm bastardizing names right now. But anyway, the guy who plays, why can't I think of his name? It starts with a B.
The original West Side Story?
in West Side Story. He's talking about that would be the very last person. And everybody in the room is kind of saying like, well, you would definitely get the part over him. And he's like, yeah, except for the fact that there's a little thing called an Oscar that he has. And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. So it's like, even though he would be like the last person that should be in this film, it's like, well, he was backed by the studio that actually put that film on, and he won this little thing called the Oscar. So, and then it's like, it's so genius. It's like, that's what was perceived. If you win that Oscar, your career is made and you're going to go on and get all the parts you want.
Yeah. Richard Beymer?
No, Michael. It's Michael. He's still alive today.
I'm not seeing any Michael in the original. We're going to figure this one out.
I'll tell you.
I haven't seen the original West Side Story since middle school.
Well, you're crazy because it's so good. I didn't mind.
And I did not see Spielberg's.
It's really good. So I like both, but I'm obviously partial to the original for a lot of reasons. Let's see, cast. I
feel like maybe it was somebody who was supposed to be.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. It's George Shakiris. I'm a fucking idiot. George Shakiris.
That's why I didn't notice anything.
And he plays Bernardo. Okay, we got there. Everybody that's listening to this is like, you fucking idiot. It's George. Yes. Okay, sorry. I had to look it up. If
that's what their reaction is, then I'm very proud of the people listening, because
me too. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for calling me out.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember everything, you guys. But Bernardo. Yeah, and they're like basically saying that the last person they would pick would be him. He's like, well, hold on. He has that Oscar. Same's true for today, I would think,
I've seen somebody mention how like people who win Best Supporting Oscars generally have a tough time transcending forward, or getting into those more lead roles. Like you would think that getting that award would get you more work in leading roles, but not necessarily. And it kind of
Kiss of Death.
Not necessarily. Yeah, maybe less a Kiss of Death, but just more just like maybe that kind of cements you more into supporting roles rather than leading roles. So,
well, I suppose we should see what this little known actor that won this year, Robert Downey Jr., does going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a little bit of history, a great history. I mean, I love that he's doing what he can to get the fuck away from MCU. I think that's clearly, and I think he's very happy he got this award, because like I know for a fact, like his entire, like the last like 5 years is him just being like, all right, how can I not be Iron Man at least for a little bit, to separate myself a little bit, because that obviously gave him a hell of a lot of money and then a lot more opportunities. But like, I guarantee he doesn't like that he's just Iron Man.
Well, yeah, it's hard for an artist to paint the same picture, and that's the point. Nobody really understands that. It's like, once you have a good thing, keep going with it. It's like, well, yeah, but at the same time, like the only band that ever continued to do the same thing, and when they veered off, it was like nobody liked him anymore, was the Ramones. They just like 3 chords, straightforward, all the time, your whole career. I don't know if there's many other artists who, and again, even then, like they experimented with some solos here and there and different things like that. It's like, but for the most part, when you signed up for the Ramones, you got the Ramones. And when you and it kind of like back in the day, when you signed up for Cary Grant, you got Cary Grant, but that's because it was expected of them. These days, artists and things like that, like they're not wanting to fit into a mold. Even Matthew McConaughey talks about, not being the romantic lead. He was like, I don't want to do that anymore. And then it's like Dallas Buyers Club all of a sudden, and Wolf of Wall Street, and all the things that he was doing, True Detective. And it's like, boom, what a chance you take to go out of that thing that people love about you. And you can either fail miserably, and they don't want to see you anymore, or you succeed like he did,
No. And I always gotta hope he gives more props to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, because that's a pivotal movie for him that I absolutely love. So,
right,
would not be the man he is today without that one. All right, cool. Anything else? Unless you want to jump into some music.
Yeah, let's jump into some music. What do you got going for your pick this week?
Well, there's a biopic that I'm really excited for that's coming out soon about Bob Dylan.
Oh, okay, great.
As we talk about biopics, James Mangold is, I haven't seen any updates, but Timothy Chalamet playing Bob Dylan in a James Mangold biopic. So, like I said, biopics are just what they are. They can be something, but when you have like such a famous figure,
Walk the Line, Mangold. Same director.
That's what I'm saying. So, but I like Walk the Line, but a lot of it has to do with how much I love Johnny Cash. Walk the Line has a lot of those cliches, like I was saying, that happened in Walk Hard. So, right. And then Bob Dylan. So I'm Not There is a movie I absolutely love. That's the one with all the.
It's on Criterion now, actually.
Is it? Nice. I haven't watched that in a couple of years. I would like to rewatch that one again. That's the one. If you haven't seen it, all the different actors, Cate Blanchett, Richard Gere, portraying different aspects of Dylan, and that's an amazing way to go about it, because like everybody knows Dylan. You at least know a little bit about his life. So to do something like, instead of just a boilerplate by the numbers retelling of like what his childhood is and rise to fame and his struggles, you do something unique like that. So I have no idea what's coming out with the biopic. I'll be excited to watch it, but Dylan always has been, still always is, one of my favorite musicians of all time. So I've just been in my spring Dylan listening mode. I go through every year. And so this song I'm recommending today is a late 80s, so middle period Dylan. This is actually a B-side of Oh Mercy from his 1989 album. Kind of a downswing period, I guess, for a lot of artists that were like started out in the 60s and 70s. The 80s were kind of a challenge for Dylan. But definitely still made a lot of good music. And that's the other thing I love about Dylan, is that he's got basically 17 of the bootleg CDs now, which are just purely B-sides and alternate takes. And just that shows the amount of the body of work that he's put out for so many fucking years. His first album came out in the late 50s, and he's still recording music. So it's just like, by dint of like how long and how much and how prolific his body of work is, it just adds so much more to it for me. But Series of Dreams is the song that I'm going with. It's a B-side. It was released on one of his first bootlegs. It didn't make the cut for that 1989 album, which, like I said, is like, if these are the songs that didn't make the cut, that's still incredible, like how great they are. It's the best song about dreaming that I've ever heard. His lyrics are so incredible, just describing what the act of dreaming is. If Nolan had any balls, he would have used this at the end of Inception. Would have just fit right in there with it. So And it's an absolute favorite song of mine. I mean, there are at least like 75, 100 Dylan songs that could be on my top 10 Dylan songs, but this one most likely is Series of Dreams from 1989.
Very cool. Second time that he's been on our jukebox playlist, and the first time that you put him on there was a Christmas classic.
Yeah, that's just a novelty for sure.
Yeah,
I love that song, but that was just what do you do when you master the world of music? You bullshit yourself and make a Christmas album. So that one was just fun. But this one is a legit. Like I said, there's like 100 songs that I could possibly be on my top 5 or top 10 Dylan songs of all time. That's just how much I love his catalog. But this one is probably up there. So,
I mean, and if everybody wants a little peek into to Dylan and wait, what the fuck was I about to say? God, I just lost it like completely. Maybe I was thinking about him in that damn Christmas video that you sent me. Oh, this is what I was going to say. If anybody wants a peek into Dylan and why, 80s were a weird time for him, watch that Netflix documentary about the making of We Are the World, and you get to see firsthand how awkward he is in that room.
That's most of his life, though. He's never been a fan of just
except for the Traveling Wilburys. I think he fit in with them.
Well, yeah, not necessarily in the interviews with the Traveling Wilburys, though. So,
okay, so moving on to my pick of the week. There's so many that I always like wanted to sift through, and it's almost like hard. It's kind of like movies when we put them up. It's like, how do I pick the film? It's like I almost like put like too much like importance on them. It's like, well, there's just a million films that I love, so pick one, Darren. And also this week is the same way, because it's like I've been sifting through thinking about it, and I'm like, I want to go with something that it's like a tried and true song that I've listened to for a long time. It's not necessarily one that I'm listening to right now or anything. It's just like a constant go-to. That's just good. It's always on my oldies playlist, which I have on Spotify, called Dad's 45s. If you're out there and want to follow it, I put some of my favorite oldie songs on there. And this one is called Raining in My Heart, by another truly wonderful performance in a one of biographical films by Gary Busey. This is Raining in My Heart by Buddy Holly. And if you've never heard the song, it really does a great job of pairing with love. And it's just like simple that way. There's something about the songs and the way they were written in their simplest forms, by just kind of comparing two things that we all know about: the weather and love. And I don't think I need to say too much more on it, except for the fact that it's very theatrical in a way. It's got like some strings to it and things like that. It's different for Buddy Holly if you've never heard this tune. Called Raining in My Heart, and it's my pick of the week.
So we got Rain, Love, and Dreams covering
very good
the music this week. So, a few relatable topics, I think. So
100%.
I love that. I love Buddy Holly.
And there's a million songs you could pick from his as well. But this is one that is not necessarily, I think, the the most known of his. And it's one of my... I mean, for him, it seems like since he's passed away, all of his songs are pretty popular, but this is one that maybe flies a little under the radar, and I love it.
How many albums did he record?
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, most of the time, if you're looking, they're mostly like greatest hits records that you find these days.
Like, I'm just curious on just the amount of like studio cuts that he actually released, because it's obviously not that many. Just curious.
Yeah.
Awesome. Legend, no doubt about that. So
a
couple legends on the playlist today. So
I like that. Well, cool. As we wrap up our St. Patrick's Day episode here with St. Patrick himself, I want to thank everybody.
This weekend is St. Patrick's Day. I forgot about that. God damn it.
Deal with this shit. Hey, good luck.
Well, you're Irish in Chicago. You got to go get drunk.
Yes. Go get drunk and watch the Dying of the River.
I got stuck in the the St. Patrick's Day parade last year without even realizing it. I was like a Saturday, and I was just heading home And I was just so pissed off.
Well, tomorrow is the LA Marathon. So I remember what it's like to be on the street during the time when, you're walking around in the city and there's drunk people everywhere with their shirts off and it's still freezing cold usually. Not fun. Even when you're young, not fun. It's always like the thing to do in Chicago is look at the police blotters on that day and just look at how many fucking crazy stories there are. So be safe out there if you're going to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Tomorrow's the LA Marathon, so I will not be driving anywhere in town tomorrow because every road is closed. I thought
you were going to say because you're going to run everywhere.
Or it's not tomorrow; it's Sunday. No, and I would run it, but I kind of am. I've been running every morning actually, except for this morning, which I'm about to do after our episode is over. But I have been since I've been cleared to run after my back surgery, and man, I love it. I've been feeling so good. Everybody knows this, but like having a little exercise in your life can really make you feel really good mentally and physically.
Preaching to the choir about that for sure. So, yeah. But as a Patrick, who's an Irishman, don't take the bullshit that we're all drunks. So garbage. So.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, cool. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you here in 2 weeks on our next film, which will be Patrick's pick, which will be arguably lower brow than what I usually.
Wait a minute. That is a garbage take. I'll say right there.
Well, I know what you mean. Since we did 63 and up 2 weeks ago, I can't really say that. But, I mean,
you're basically antagonizing me to choose a select choice now. So
I know. That's why when he sends me a text that Freddie Got Fingered is on the Criterion channel, I start to think, oh, shit, are we going to be covering that, in 2 weeks? So I never know with you.
Did you watch it on the Criterion? I watched it on your Criterion. So.
I haven't yet. No, I'm going to. Nice. But also Cocktail is on there. And I fucking love that film. It's interesting the way that they talked about Criterion. These are all the best Razzie Award winners. So sort of the films that people think are,
is that what the collection is?
Good. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that was the collection.
Yeah, exactly. It's specifically about that. But what they say about it, and whoever wrote it is a genius. It's they're so wild and crazy, and they've lasted over time as ended up being very interesting films, and for a reason. And so they've curated that as the Razzie collection. And Showgirls is on there, Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls, and a lot of other movies. So that's a collection I'm trying to get into with my girlfriend. So I've been waiting for Freddie Got Fingered because I'm gonna watch it for sure.
Oh, you cut out there. I haven't heard the last 15 seconds, but I'm sure the audience enjoyed whatever insight you just gave. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, hopefully it got deleted because who gives a shit? Anyway. Thanks for joining us here today on Remainders. Thanks for listening. We have been getting some awesome comments on our YouTube channel. Really good comments on our 24-hour Party People episode. And I'm learning so much that I didn't know. We are not the end-all be-all. We just love movies and we do our best to research films. But we love getting more information from you guys. Even the snarky shit. Bring it on. Because that means we're doing our job and getting the conversation going about the movies, which we love. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And Patrick, anything else to say before we sign off?
All hail Snark.
All hail Snark. All right. Well, I'll see you here in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
See you, bud.
Bye-bye.